Marcus Chen had everything: money, power, and respect. But when his security cameras caught his elderly housekeeper stealing food from his kitchen 3 nights in a row, he decided to follow her. What he discovered in that rundown neighborhood didn't reveal a thief. It shattered every assumption he had about the woman who raised him, and it changed his life forever. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow's story will blow your mind. Marcus Chen stood at the window of his Manhattan penthouse, looking down at the city he had conquered. At 35, he owned 12 buildings, ran 3 companies, and had his face on magazine covers. People called him brilliant. They called him ruthless. They weren't wrong about either. His phone buzzed with notifications. Stock prices. Meeting requests. Interviews. Everything in his life moved fast, calculated, and according to plan. He liked it that way. No surprises. No emotions getting in the way of success. Behind him, Maria Santos moved quietly through the apartment. She had been part of his household for 28 years, since Marcus was 7 years old. After the car accident that killed his parents, Maria had been there. She fed him. She sat with him during nightmares. She taught him to tie his shoes and say his prayers. But Marcus rarely thought about those days now. Maria was simply there, like the furniture or the art on the walls. Reliable. Invisible. Expected. "Your dinner is ready, Mr. Chen," Maria said softly from the doorway. Marcus nodded without turning around. "Thank you. Leave it on the table." She disappeared again, her footsteps barely making a sound on the marble floor. Marcus checked his watch. He had 30 minutes before his next video call with investors in Tokyo. Everything was on schedule. Everything was under control. Or so he thought. It started with something small. Marcus was reviewing his household expenses when he noticed an unusual pattern in the kitchen inventory. His smart home system tracked everything: groceries ordered, meals prepared, items used. The data always matched perfectly. But now there were gaps. Small ones. A few cans of soup. Some bread. Fruit. Canned vegetables. Nothing expensive or large, but enough to trigger the system's alert. The pattern appeared 3 times over 2 weeks, always late at night. Marcus pulled up the access logs. Only 3 people had kitchen access after 10 at night: himself, his personal chef who was currently on vacation, and Maria. Her security card had been used on the same nights the food went missing. He sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. Maria had never asked for anything. Never complained. Never taken a day off unless he insisted. In 28 years, she had been perfect. So why would she steal now? Marcus told himself it didn't matter. The food was nothing. He could afford to lose 100 times that amount and never notice. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the trust. The silence. The fact that Maria, who knew everything about him, had kept this secret. He needed to understand why. Not to punish her, but because something felt wrong, and Marcus always investigated what felt wrong. He made a decision. Tomorrow night he would follow her. Marcus canceled his evening plans without explanation. His assistant looked surprised but didn't ask questions. People rarely questioned Marcus Chen. By 9:30, he was sitting in his car half a block from his building. The windows were tinted dark. He wore a plain black jacket and a baseball cap, things he never wore. He felt ridiculous, like a character in a movie. But he couldn't turn back now. At 10:15, Maria emerged from the service entrance. She carried a large canvas bag over her shoulder. Even from a distance, Marcus could see it was heavy. She walked slowly, her steps careful and deliberate. She didn't take a taxi. She walked 3 blocks to the subway station and took the train heading downtown. Marcus followed, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice him. He had never been on the subway before. The noise, the crowds, the smell of old metal and cleaning chemicals, it was a different world. Maria sat quietly, the bag resting on her lap. She looked tired. Marcus realized he had never really looked at her before, not truly. She was 72 years old. Her hair was completely white now. Her hands, resting on the bag, were thin and wrinkled. After 20 minutes, she got off at a stop Marcus didn't recognize. The neighborhood was different here. Broken streetlights. Graffiti on the walls. Shops with barred windows. Maria walked like she knew every corner. Marcus stayed in the shadows, his heart beating faster than it should. The further they walked, the more Marcus felt out of place. This wasn't the world of glass towers and expensive restaurants. This was survival. He saw people sleeping on benches. A woman pushing a shopping cart filled with bottles. Kids playing basketball on a court with a broken net. Maria turned down a narrow street lined with old apartment buildings. She stopped in front of one that looked like it might collapse in a strong wind. The paint was peeling. The steps were cracked. But Maria climbed them without hesitation. She went inside. Marcus waited, then carefully approached the building. Through a grimy window, he could see a hallway with flickering lights. He heard voices, children's voices, coming from somewhere inside. He moved to a side window and looked in. What he saw made him freeze. It was a large room, probably a basement converted into a community space. Folding tables were set up in rows. Children sat at them, maybe 20 or 30 kids, all different ages. Some were doing homework. Others were reading. A few were eating sandwiches. And Maria was in the middle of it all. She was unpacking the bag she had carried, pulling out the food Marcus had seen missing from his kitchen. She arranged it carefully on plates, made sure each child got something to eat. The children smiled at her, called her Grandma Maria, hugged her. Marcus stood there, unable to move, unable to process what he was seeing. This was where his food was going. Not to some black market. Not being sold for profit. It was feeding hungry children. Marcus watched for over an hour. Maria moved through the room with purpose and love. She helped a boy with his math homework. She listened to a girl read from a picture book. She wiped tears from a child's face and whispered something that made the child smile. An older woman, maybe 60, came over to Maria. They talked quietly, but Marcus could read their expressions. Gratitude. The older woman gestured to the children, then to the building itself. Maria nodded, touched the woman's shoulder, said something reassuring. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Shame. That's what it was. Deep, burning shame. Here was Maria working for him all day, then coming here at night to help people he had never even thought about. Using her own energy, her own time, and yes, his food, to fill a need that clearly existed. And she had never said a word to him about it. Never asked for help. Never suggested he might care. Why would she? Marcus thought bitterly. When had he ever shown her that he cared about anything beyond his next deal, his next success, his next achievement? He watched as Maria finally started packing up. The children were leaving, escorted by parents or older siblings. Maria cleaned the tables, folded them, swept the floor. Even here, she was taking care of things. Marcus stepped back into the shadows as Maria emerged from the building. He followed her back to the subway, back uptown, but this time something was different. He wasn't following a thief. He was following someone who had shown him exactly how small his life really was. The next morning, Marcus sat at his breakfast table. Maria brought him coffee, perfectly made as always. She stood waiting for instructions, her face calm and professional. Marcus looked up at her. Maria, sit down. She blinked, surprised. Sir? Please. Sit. Maria slowly sat down across from him. Her hands folded in her lap. She looked worried now, like she was preparing for bad news. Marcus took a breath. I followed you last night. Maria's face didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Not fear. Something else. Maybe relief. I see, she said quietly. Why didn't you tell me? Marcus asked. Why didn't you ask for help? Maria was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. Because I didn't think you would understand. You live in a different world, Mr. Chen. Those children, that neighborhood, it's not part of your life. I didn't want to burden you with problems you couldn't relate to. But you raised me, Marcus said. You were there when I had nothing. When I was alone and scared. You knew what it felt like. Maria nodded. Yes, I knew. That's why I couldn't let those children feel that way if I could help it. Even a little bit. Marcus felt his throat tighten. You should have trusted me. Should I have? Maria asked, and there was no anger in her voice, just honest curiosity. When was the last time we talked about something other than your schedule or your meals? When did you last ask me how I was, what I cared about, what kept me awake at night? Marcus had no answer. Because she was right. Tell me about the place, Marcus said. How did you find it? Maria relaxed slightly. It's called Hope House. It started 5 years ago when Mrs. Patterson, the woman you saw me talking to, lost her daughter to drugs. She decided to create a safe place for neighborhood children. A place where they could do homework, get a meal, just be kids for a few hours. And you've been helping all this time? Yes. I volunteer 3 nights a week. I bring food when I can. The organization has almost no funding. Mrs. Patterson runs it from her pension and whatever donations people can give. Most nights, there isn't enough food for all the children. Marcus felt something hard settle in his stomach. So you took mine. I know it was wrong, Maria said, meeting his eyes. I only took things that were about to expire, things that would be thrown away anyway. But yes, I took them without asking. If you want me to leave, I understand. Leave? Marcus stared at her. Maria, you're not leaving. That's not why I'm telling you this. Then why? Marcus stood up and walked to the window. The city stretched out below him, full of buildings he owned and people he employed. But what had he actually built? What had he actually given back? Because I want to help, he said. Really help. Not just write a check and forget about it. I want to understand what those children need. What that community needs. Maria stood up slowly. You mean that? Yes, Marcus said. Show me. That evening, Marcus returned to Hope House. This time, he wasn't hiding in the shadows. Maria walked beside him, leading him through the door. The children looked up when they entered. Some seemed curious. Others were wary. They weren't used to people like Marcus, in his expensive clothes and confident walk. Mrs. Patterson approached them. Maria introduced Marcus simply as a friend who wants to help. We appreciate any help, Mrs. Patterson said carefully. But we've had promises before that didn't lead anywhere. Marcus nodded. I understand. I'm not here to make promises. I'm here to listen and learn. For the next 2 hours, Marcus did exactly that. He sat with the children, helped them with homework, listened to their stories. One girl, maybe 10 years old, told him about how she wanted to be a doctor but her school didn't have science books. A boy showed him drawings he had made of buildings he wanted to design someday. These weren't broken children. They were smart, creative, full of dreams. They just needed support, resources, someone to believe in them. Marcus talked with Mrs. Patterson about the center's needs. It was overwhelming. The building needed repairs. They needed more food, more books, more volunteers. The heating system barely worked. The roof leaked when it rained. How do you keep going? Marcus asked. Mrs. Patterson smiled. Because if we don't, who will? These children deserve better than what life has given them. We can't fix everything, but we can give them a few hours of safety and hope. Sometimes that's enough to change a life. Marcus thought about his own childhood. After his parents died, those few hours of safety that Maria provided had changed his life too. As Marcus prepared to leave, a boy around 8 years old approached him. The child had been quiet all evening, sitting alone in the corner with a book. Are you rich? The boy asked directly. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. Yes, I am. Then why are you here? There was no challenge in the question, just genuine curiosity. Because someone I care about comes here, Marcus said. And I wanted to understand why. The boy nodded thoughtfully. Miss Maria is nice. She brings us food and helps with reading. She never makes us feel bad about being poor. What's your name? Marcus asked. David. What are you reading, David? The boy held up a worn paperback about space exploration. It's about astronauts. I want to go to space someday. But my teacher says kids like me don't become astronauts. Marcus felt anger flash through him. Your teacher is wrong. Do you know who Mae Jemison is? David shook his head. She was the first African-American woman in space. She grew up in a neighborhood not very different from this one. She became a doctor, an engineer, and an astronaut. Your circumstances don't determine your future, David. Your determination does. The boy's eyes widened. Really? Really? If you want to be an astronaut, then study hard. Learn everything you can about science and math. And don't let anyone tell you that you can't. Maria was watching this conversation from across the room. When Marcus glanced at her, she had tears in her eyes. Later, as they walked to the subway together, Maria said quietly, "That was the Marcus I remember. The boy who believed anything was possible." What happened to him? Marcus asked. Life did, Maria said. Success did. But maybe he's still in there somewhere. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in his home office, laptop open, making calculations. Hope House needed money, but it needed more than that. It needed structure, sustainability, long-term planning. By morning, he had a plan. He called Maria to his office. I want to help Hope House, he said. But I want to do it right. Not just throw money at problems. I want to build something that lasts. What do you have in mind? Maria asked. Marcus showed her the document he had created. First, immediate repairs to the building. Proper heating, fixed roof, new furniture. Second, a steady food supply program, no more worrying about where the next meal comes from. Third, educational resources, computers, books, tutoring programs. Fourth, a scholarship fund for children who show potential but can't afford higher education. Maria's hand went to her mouth. Marcus, this is too much. We couldn't accept. Yes, you can, Marcus interrupted. And you will. But there's a condition. Maria tensed. What condition? I want you to run it. Not Mrs. Patterson, though she can stay involved. You know these children. You understand what they need. You have the heart and the wisdom to make this work. I'll provide the resources, but you'll provide the soul. I'm just a housekeeper, Maria whispered. No, Marcus said firmly. You're the woman who raised me. You're the woman who has given everything to help others. You're the woman I should have valued and listened to years ago. Don't call yourself just anything. Maria wiped tears from her eyes. You've changed. You changed me, Marcus said. Now let me help you change their lives. Marcus thought everyone would be grateful for his help. He was wrong. When he presented his plan to Mrs. Patterson and the other volunteers at Hope House, he met resistance. We appreciate the offer, Mrs. Patterson said carefully. But we've run this place for 5 years without corporate involvement. We know what we're doing. I'm not trying to take over, Marcus explained. I just want to help make things better. That's what they all say. Another volunteer spoke up. Then they come in, change everything, put their name on the building, and disappear when it's not convenient anymore. Marcus felt frustration rising. I'm not like that. Aren't you? Mrs. Patterson asked gently. Mr. Chen, you seem like a good man. But you live in a different world. You can't understand what these families go through. What these children face every day. Your help comes with assumptions and expectations that might hurt more than they help. Maria stepped forward. He's sincere. I've known him since he was a child. He wants to help genuinely. And what happens when he gets bored? Someone else asked. When helping poor children isn't exciting anymore. When his business demands his attention. We'll be left worse off than we started, dependent on support that disappeared. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. They were right to be cautious. He had no track record here. No proof he wouldn't abandon them when things got difficult. "What would it take for you to trust me?" he asked. The room was silent. Finally, Mrs. Patterson said, "Time. Consistency. Show us you're committed. Don't just write a check. Be here. Learn our names. Understand our struggles. Then maybe we can talk about bigger plans." Marcus nodded slowly. "I can do that." For the next month, Marcus showed up at Hope House 3 evenings a week. He didn't announce himself. He didn't bring photographers or PR teams. He simply came and helped. He tutored children in math and science. He fixed broken tables. He mopped floors. He served food alongside Maria and the other volunteers. Some nights he went home exhausted, his expensive clothes stained and dirty. His business suffered. He missed meetings, turned down opportunities. His assistant and partners questioned his priorities. Rumors spread that Marcus Chen was having a breakdown. But something was changing inside him. With each evening at Hope House, with each child he helped, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: purpose beyond profit, meaning beyond success. He learned the children's names. David, who wanted to be an astronaut. Sarah, who wrote poetry in a notebook she guarded carefully. Miguel, who was brilliant at chess but struggled with reading. Keisha, who took care of her 3 younger siblings because their mother worked 2 jobs. He learned about their lives, the challenges they faced, the systems that failed them, the small miracles that kept them going. And slowly, the volunteers began to accept him. Not because of his money or his status, but because he showed up. He was consistent. He was humble. He listened more than he talked. One evening, after all the children had left, Mrs. Patterson approached him. "You've surprised me, Mr. Chen." "How so?" Marcus asked, putting away folding chairs. "Most people with your wealth think money alone can solve problems. But you're learning that it takes time, attention, and respect. You're learning to see people, not just problems." Marcus smiled. "I have a good teacher." He glanced at Maria, who was wiping down tables across the room. "Then don't waste the education," Mrs. Patterson said. "These children need someone who sees their potential, not just their poverty." Everything changed on a cold Tuesday evening. Marcus had just arrived at Hope House when he saw police cars and an ambulance outside. His heart raced as he ran toward the building. Inside, he found chaos. Children were crying. Volunteers were trying to calm them down. And in the corner, David, the boy who wanted to be an astronaut, sat on the floor, his face swollen and bloody. Marcus rushed over. "What happened?" David's mother, a thin woman Marcus had met briefly before, was holding her son and crying. "Gang members. They tried to recruit him after school. When he said no, they beat him. Said he'd be sorry." Marcus felt rage boil inside him. "We need to call the police." "The police were here," Mrs. Patterson said grimly. "They took a report. Said there's nothing they can do without witnesses. Nobody in the neighborhood will testify. They're too afraid." David looked up at Marcus, his eyes filled with pain and fear. "I just want to study. Why won't they leave me alone?" Marcus knelt down beside him. "This isn't fair. You did nothing wrong." "Doesn't matter what's fair," David's mother said bitterly. "This is our reality. Maybe I should let him join. At least then he'd be protected." "No." The word burst from Marcus. "That's not the answer." "Then what is?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "How do I keep my son safe? How do I give him a future when the streets keep pulling him back?" Marcus had no answer. All his money, all his success, and he couldn't protect one child from the violence that surrounded him. He felt helpless and useless. That night, Maria found him sitting alone in his car outside Hope House. She got in without asking. "You can't save everyone," she said gently. "Then what's the point?" Marcus asked, his voice breaking. "What's the point of all my wealth if I can't protect one child?" "The point is to try," Maria said. "The point is to not give up. The point is to be here when it matters. Marcus didn't go home that night. He drove around the city, thinking about David, about all the children at Hope House, about the systems that trapped them in poverty and violence. By morning, he had made a decision. He called an emergency meeting with his board of directors. "I'm restructuring the company," he announced. 20% of our profits will go to a new foundation focused on education and community development, starting with neighborhoods like the one around Hope House. The boardroom erupted. "You can't do that," one director shouted. "You'll destroy shareholder value." "I don't care," Marcus said calmly. "I've spent 15 years building wealth. Now I'm going to spend the rest of my life building something that matters." "You're making an emotional decision," another director argued. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Marcus acknowledged, "but I'll regret doing nothing more." The vote was contentious, but Marcus still had controlling interest. The motion passed. Several board members resigned immediately. Marcus's business partners called him reckless. The press wrote articles questioning his judgment. But Marcus didn't waver. He worked with community leaders, educators, and social workers to create comprehensive programs. Not just for Hope House, but for similar centers across the city. After-school programs, mentorship opportunities, job training for parents, safe housing initiatives. It wasn't quick. It wasn't easy. There were failures and frustrations. Some programs didn't work. Some communities were too damaged by years of neglect to trust anyone promising help. But slowly things began to change. Children like David got scholarships. Families found stable housing. Communities started to heal. And Marcus found something he hadn't known he was missing: peace. Not the temporary satisfaction of a successful deal, but deep, lasting peace that came from knowing his life had meaning beyond himself. 5 years later, Marcus stood in a new building. It had taken 3 years to construct, but now it was finished. The Maria Santos Community Center. A state-of-the-art facility with classrooms, a library, a gym, a health clinic, and spaces for community gatherings. Maria stood beside him, now 77 but still energetic and involved in every decision about the center. The children she had fed and taught over the years were here today, along with hundreds of others whose lives had been touched by the programs they had built together. David was here too, now 13, standing at a podium. He had won a prestigious science scholarship and would be attending a top private school in the fall. He was speaking to the crowd about his journey. 5 years ago, I was a kid who got beat up for wanting to study, David said. I thought my dreams were impossible. But 2 people showed me different. Miss Maria taught me that caring for others is the most important thing we can do. And Mr. Chen taught me that where you come from doesn't determine where you're going. Marcus felt tears on his face. He didn't try to hide them. David continued, "This center isn't just a building. It's a promise. A promise that every child deserves a chance. That every dream matters. That none of us are alone. Thank you, Miss Maria and Mr. Chen, for keeping that promise." The crowd applauded. Children cheered. Maria squeezed Marcus's hand. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it," Marcus corrected. "I just finally paid attention." Later, as the celebration continued, Marcus walked through the center. He saw children reading in the library, playing basketball in the gym, working on computers in the learning lab, parents attending job training courses, families sharing meals in the community kitchen. This was success, Marcus realized. Not the numbers in his bank account or the buildings with his name on them. This, seeing people thrive, seeing communities heal, seeing hope replace despair, was what success really looked like. Mrs. Patterson approached him. "You kept your promise," she said. "You stayed. You built something real." "We built it together," Marcus said. "Yes," she agreed. "We did. And we're just getting started." Marcus smiled. She was right. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The beginning of a life lived not for himself, but for something bigger. Something that would outlast his money, his buildings, and even his name. He thought back to that night 5 years ago when he had followed Maria through the streets, angry and confused about missing food. He had thought he was uncovering a betrayal. Instead, he had uncovered the truth about who he was and who he needed to become. Maria had always known that truth. She had tried to show him through her quiet example, her endless service, her unconditional love. It had just taken him 30 years to finally see it. "Thank you," he said to Maria, who had walked over to join him. "For what?" she asked. "For never giving up on me. For showing me what really matters. For being the person I needed when I didn't know I needed anyone." Maria smiled, her eyes soft with love. "You were always that person, Marcus. You just forgot for a while. I'm glad you remembered." They stood together, watching the children play, watching the community thrive, watching hope take root in a place that had known too much despair. And Marcus knew that this, right here, was exactly where he was meant to be. Not above anyone. Not separate from the struggle. But part of it, part of the solution, part of the healing. He was finally home. This story is inspiring, but here's the real question. What are you going to do differently after watching this? How will you see the people around you? Drop your answer below. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Turn on notifications so you never miss our next inspiring story. Remember, it's never too late to change, to see people truly, and to build something that matters. Thank you for watching.